Because as we come to the end of the Biden-Harris administration now, I mean, here's the special report that's just put out today by The Economist magazine. The title is, quote, "The American Economy, the Envy of the World." This is a multi-day special report that's coming out now from The Economist. Here's the first installment in this multi-part series that's just out today. Quote, "The American economy has left other rich countries in the dust." That's the American economy at the end of the Biden-Harris administration. I mean, if you're making a business decision about who will do a better job handling the economy, well, the Biden-Harris economy has not only left every other rich country in the world in the dust, it has left the record of the Trump administration in the dust, right? Literally what they're calling a dream economy, the best job market in the history of the United States. That's what the Biden-Harris administration has done in their management of the U.S. economy. So is that what you're basing your business decision on? Maybe it's not the broad question of who will do a good job with the economy, who's shown that they can do a good job with the economy. Maybe your business decision when it comes to this election is more specific. Maybe it's about the deficit. Maybe you're a fiscal hawk, and that's the basis of your business decision that you're making about who to support here. Well, here's the headline today at the Wall Street Journal. Quote, "Economists say inflation and deficits will be higher under Trump than Harris." Quote, "According to a quarterly survey by the Wall Street Journal, most economists think inflation, interest rates, and deficits would be higher under the policies former President Donald Trump would pursue in a second administration than under those proposed by Vice President Kamala Harris." Quote, 65% of economists see Trump's proposed policies putting more upward pressure on the federal deficit than Kamala Harris's policies. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates Trump's plans would widen federal budget deficits by more than twice the expected increase under Harris. So if that's the basis for your business decision about this election, if all you say you care about is fiscal responsibility and the deficit, right, bringing that deficit down, well, Trump doubles Harris. He laps Harris in terms of what he's planning to pile on to the deficit. Right? Similarly, let's say your business decision on this election is on inflation. Well, that's also a business decision about this election that should point you in one direction. Quote, "Of the economists who responded to the Wall Street Journal's question on inflation, 68% said prices would rise faster under Trump than under Harris." 68%. 68% of economists don't agree that today is Monday or that the Patriots suck this year. But 68% of economists agree that Trump is proposing really bad policies if what you care about is inflation. So what are you basing your business decision on when thinking about this election? I mean, maybe your business decision is less about data and policy, and it's more about just the kind of person you want the candidate to be. You hear this all the time from people who describe themselves as making a business decision about how to vote. They say they want somebody centrist, somebody moderate, sensible, right? Somebody right in the middle. That's good for business. Somebody who can appeal to reasonable people in both parties. If that's your approach to your business decision about this election, well, there is a candidate in this election who has a lot of very high-profile support from people in the other party. Just today, the Harris campaign released the latest ad from another Republican endorsing Harris, in this case, the Republican mayor of an important conservative city in swing state Arizona. I mean, there's like a campaign trail tour group now of former Trump administration officials who are doing swing state events to tell people to not vote for the man they served under in the last presidential administration under Trump. They are instead touring the swing states telling people to vote for Kamala Harris. Notice that there's no equivalent of that on the other side. There's no group that's like former Biden officials for Trump or former Obama officials for Trump. There's nothing like that. But there are lots and lots of officials from former Republican administrations and from Trump's own administration who are publicly begging Americans by the dozens, publicly begging Americans to vote for Harris and not for him. So just on the facts, I mean, if your business decision is economic performance broadly, that breaks for Harris. If your business decision is the deficit, that breaks for Harris. If your business decision is inflation, that breaks for Harris. If your business decision is on whether the candidate is bipartisan seeming and can appeal across both parties, clearly that's Harris. But maybe your business decision is more petty or at least more personal. Maybe you're making a business decision based on sort of sociology, based on which presidential candidate seems to have better relationships, more solid, mutually respectful relationships with actual people in business right now. And that's, of course, a little woollier. It's less of a data-driven thing, but here, for your consideration, is a New York Times major feature today, a feature, quote, based on interviews with more than 24 campaign officials, policy experts, donors, lobbyists, and business leaders. And this is all about how the Harris campaign, quote, has carefully courted business leaders, organizing a steady stream of meetings and calls in which corporate executives and donors offer their thoughts on tax policy, financial regulation, and other issues. And now, again, personally, your mileage may vary on that as to whether or not you like that. But people who are supposedly making a business decision about the election along these lines will presumably love it, right? Taking a carefully courting business leaders, organizing a steady stream of meetings and calls with corporate executives to hear their thoughts on tax policy and regulation. Yeah, I mean, if you want a president who has a mutually respectful and ongoing relationship, consultative relationship with the business community, you must love that, right? Right down to the Harris campaign spokesman telling the Times for this piece today that if she wins, quote, Ms. Harris would continue to listen to the business community as she pursues a bold capitalist vision for the economy. Quote, as president, Kamala Harris will continue to be open and pragmatic about how to deliver that vision for the American people, said the spokesman. And again, this may or may not be your thing, but business people cite this kind of thing all the time when they talk about what's important to them about making their own business-driven decision about how they're going to vote and which candidate they're going to support. Right? I mean, on the other side, here's Trump just a few days ago, bizarrely posting online that he's very happy to have the endorsement of the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Very happy to have the endorsement of Jamie Dimon. Oh, Jamie Dimon's endorsed me. Isn't that wonderful? He made that up. Jamie Dimon has not endorsed Trump for president, but Trump went out and said that he did, presumably hoping that nobody would notice that he just made it up. I mean, if you're making your business decision on the election based on the perceived relationships between the candidate, healthy consultation between the candidate and business leaders, this is not just a theoretical thing. You do have stuff to go on, right? And a track record of it, like Trump's big meeting with CEOs that was organized for him by the Business Roundtable this summer. Remember how that one worked out? Headline, CEOs at Trump meeting say ex-president is, quote, meandering and, quote, doesn't know what he's talking about. Former President Donald Trump failed to impress everyone in a room full of top CEOs this week, multiple attendees told CNBC. One CEO who was in the room said, quote, Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Several CEOs, quote, said that Trump was remarkably meandering and could not keep a straight thought and was all over the map. But maybe that's not how you're making your business decision about this election. Maybe you're making this a business decision in the pure, simple, straightforward sense that you just want a good business person in the job. Again, you hear this all the time from people who say this is the way they're approaching this election. It'd be good to have a person in there who's got business skills, right? That'd be great in a politician. Somebody who's shown real savvy, real skill as a player in the business world, who has that kind of experience. Right? So it's not just the business company that he keeps, although it is that too, but it's also his own good business track record, his good business judgment. Well, you've got stuff to go on here as well for making that kind of a decision about this election. I mean, one of the stories I think that has been most underplayed in this whole campaign, just because there's never been anything like it before, is what's going on in Trump's business life right now. I mean, the history in Trump's business life is all very obvious and very well known in terms of his own record, right? Just even in the last few years, even in his years since he's been a public figure and a candidate for office. His foundation was shut down as a scam. His for-profit so-called university was shut down as a scam. His family business, which he inherited from his father, was criminally convicted on tax fraud. It owes hundreds of millions of dollars now in civil fraud penalties. The company was implicated as essentially the laundering entity in Trump's own 34 felony convictions, for which he's going to be sentenced in November. He could be going to prison. His company's CFO has now done 2 recent stints in Rikers because of the company's criminal behavior and his own. Right, and that's all just the recent history of Trump in business. That's all before this remarkable campaign season he's having right now in business. Right, Trump as a businessman is happening right before us. He's selling the commemorative silver coins with a cross between him and the Chucky doll as the face on them. He's selling his creepy gold sneakers. He's selling his digital trading cards. He's selling his Bibles. He's selling his watches, including the $100,000 watches that nobody's ever seen. But he promises that you'll get one if you send him the money someday. I mean, imagine if Kamala Harris was doing anything like this in her presidential campaign, right? Hello, foreign enemy country or organized crime leader. Would you like to pay me $1 million bribe while I'm here running and on the precipice of becoming president? If you would like to bribe me, just buy 10 of these supposed watches, and I'll never send them to you, but I'll keep your $1 million and I'll pay you back somehow once I'm president. I mean, imagine if Kamala Harris was doing this. But, you know, anyway, if you're making a business decision on this election, and it's because you like the idea of somebody savvy and connected in business being there in the Oval Office, let me just ask you this about your business decision about this election. Are you, as a business-minded person, are you positively inclined toward the very latest venture he has launched just literally weeks before the election? Do you think this is an impressive move in business? Headline: Trump teams up with pickup artist for new crypto scheme. His business partners in his new cryptocurrency scheme are, number 1, the founder of Date Hotter Girls, LLC, and number 2, an ex-con who was previously involved in a scam colon cleanse product that was advertised on Facebook, whose owner is now in prison. Business partner for Trump, number 2, also calls himself, I'm sorry to call him number 2 with the whole colon cleanse thing. Never mind. But he calls himself the dirtbag of the internet. Here we are back to the colon cleanse. He calls himself the dirtbag of the internet. He has starred on podcasts like, quote, From Broke to Millionaire in 14 Days. These are Trump's business partners in his new crypto venture. In terms of their most recent ventures before teaming up with Trump, his new business partners founded recently an OnlyFans porn competitor in Puerto Rico that reportedly crashed on launch day, lost its subscribers' information, and it has now already gone out of business. They also founded another crypto company before this new one with Donald Trump. It was called Dough Finance, not dough like Homer Simpson, but dough like bread. Still, though, you might call it Dough Finance. The one thing it's famous for is losing millions of dollars of its users' money because the computer code that was used by the Dough Finance guys had a gigantic flaw in it that just let thieves walk away with the money that people had invested in Dough Finance. They just left the door open and the money was all taken because the code allowed thieves to do that. Well, according to the industry publication CoinDesk, that same code from Dough Finance appears to be, quote, remarkably similar to the code that the Trump crypto company is going to be using for its new venture, which he's just announced weeks before the election. Sounds like real savvy business stuff, right? Real high-end stuff. Trump has put both his adult sons, Don Jr. and Eric, the blonde one, on the payroll as employees of this new crypto company. He has also put on the payroll his teenage son, Barron. Barron has not just a job at the company, he has a job title at the company, Barron Trump is listed as the company's, quote, visionary. He is 18. Because that sounds like a really high-end, prestigious business, right? That sounds like a good businessman, not at all a rinky-dink, shady, making-it-up con man business. The New York Times reports that Trump and his crypto business partners, their plan for this high-end, impressive new business they're building, their plan ultimately is to use this crypto venture that they've just founded to, quote, restructure the national debt of the United States. That's the plan. I mean, surely anybody making a business decision about this election is going to choose that kind of big brain business thinking, right? With the date hotter girls guy and the ex-con, and they'll have the national debt all taken care of because it's going to have Barron, the visionary, restructuring it all. What was it that Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, said? He said, quote, look, you may not like Donald Trump personally, but you'll like his policies. It's a business decision. You're making a business decision. But maybe that's not the kind of business decision you're making. Maybe you're not moved one way or another by Trump's personal business acumen and savvy. Maybe you, as a business person yourself, just want to be left alone to run your business. You just want a government, you just want a leader of the U.S. government who's going to leave business alone, just not mess with you, just not mess with the private sector. Is that the basis on which you're making your business decision in this election? Because if so, have you met Trump's running mate?
Unless you're willing to make these people feel economic pain, there's no serious way to fight back against it. Google, Apple, Delta, they're not going to stop beating up on Georgia for passing common sense voter integrity measures just because we complain about it, or just because a congressional committee man sends a strongly worded letter to their CEO. The only way to push back against this stuff in a real way is to make these companies feel economic pain. And so, there are a lot of ideas out there for how to do it. One idea is to basically end the preferential tax treatment that we give to Google.
We need to use the government, use the tax system to make these companies feel economic pain so we can force them to do what we want for political reasons.
We have to be willing to actually fight these companies with fire. We've got to change that incentive and make these companies actually feel a little bit of pain for aligning with our enemies in the culture war.
Is your business decision about this election about wanting to be left alone by the government, leave the private sector alone, leave business alone? Is your business decision about this election based on just a preference for small government, right now, modest government that doesn't try to do too much? Is that how you're making your business decision about this election?
I think the thing that we have to take away from the last 10 years is that we really need to be really ruthless when it comes to the exercise of power.
Are you a small government person? Modest government person? Leave the private sector alone person? If your business decision about this next election is about business being left alone, about small government, you don't have the hardest decision in the world to make here. There have been a lot of headlines recently about Trump threatening to take media companies off the air, to use the government to punish ABC, CBS, MSNBC, NBC, right? Use the government to punish media companies for airing an interview with Kamala Harris, or airing criticism of Trump, or moderating a debate that Trump lost against Harris. Trump recently said about the New York Times, quote, wait until you see what I'm going to do with them, threatening that if he's president in what he said would be 3, 4, 5 days after he became president, he would do something to the New York Times. He called the New York Times, quote, disgusting. And hey, maybe nobody cares about the media, about news organizations as companies. But if you are making a business decision about this presidential election, do you think a president who says he's going to destroy media companies for criticizing him, do you think he's only going to do that to those kinds of companies? This summer, he threatened to jail personally the head of Facebook. He threatened to criminally prosecute Google because he does not like the search results that Google produces about him. when an online acquaintance of J.D. Vance recently published some of his personal correspondence with Vance, in which Vance criticized Trump's record as president. Trump's eldest son, Don Jr., who is the co-chair of the Trump presidential transition team, he immediately called for the government to take punitive action against that man's employer, which happened to be the huge consulting firm Deloitte. Deloitte had nothing at all to do with this employee making a personal decision on his own time to publish his personal private correspondence with Vance. But the Trump family says, well, the power of the U.S. government should now be trained against that company to punish them for having an employee who put out information critical of Trump. So if you're making a business decision about this election, is that the kind of business environment you're looking forward to on purely business terms? I have a guest that I'm really looking forward to talking about this tonight. Somebody I've never talked to before that I'm really happy we were able to get to come here on the show. I'm going to invite him here in just a moment. But I just want to give you one last thing here. In the current issue of Vanity Fair, reporter James Pogue has a profile of Trump's former campaign manager, Steve Bannon, who you may know is more influential than ever in Trump world and, by extension, in the Trump campaign, even as he awaits the end of his federal prison sentence right now. But James Pogue writes in Vanity Fair right now that if you have, enjoyed what Steve Bannon has brought to Trumpist politics so far, right? All that, destroy the administrative state stuff, and we need a multipolar white world led by Russia, and take it as a badge of honor if you're called a racist, all that Bannon stuff. If you've enjoyed that from Bannon over these last few years, then you will love what his priority is right now for Trump getting back into the White House for a second term. The new plan, the new big idea we're getting from Bannon and his whole wing of the Trump movement, which includes J.D. Vance, the big new idea we're getting for the Trump second term is the, quote, abandonment of the dollar. He wants to end the American currency. He's working on, quote, the end of the dollar empire. Well, that would be quite a business decision. Who in the business world, who is making a business decision about this next election, thinks that the smart, business-minded way ahead is to drop the dollar as the currency, as the world's default trading currency? Doesn't that sound like an idea to you, right? The idea of making a business decision about this election is honestly kind of a dumb one, right? We're not shareholders. We're not running a company. We are citizens, and this is a country. But for people, and there are a lot of them who say they are making a business decision about this election, what are they thinking? Or is this all just stuff that they don't know?